So this evening we're going to look at this judgment delivered by the appellate court. What it means for the political parties. But beyond that, we are taking it. Not just we are not just looking at the political parties affected. We are also questioning. Why we are witnessing these kinds of judgments from the lower courts. Is it that they lack judicial discipline, or is it that they cannot accurately interpret the Constitution? We would like to look at it from various angles and know what this means for even an average Nigerian. My name is Ifoma Wabufo. And this evening, I'm joined by a constitutional lawyer and public affairs analyst, Chief Barrister Obonnaya Amos Okoro. You're welcome to the program. Good evening.
Good evening. Thank you very much.
You're welcome, Barrister.
Thank you.
All right. The lower courts, they are in the news again, and we are seeing um, the judgment from the appellate court. Right. A lot of Nigerians would say that it's almost difficult to get justice in lower courts, right? Even when it comes to political cases. What do you make of this recent judgment? What does it mean to you, this recent judgment from the Court of Appeal?
Well, it's not difficult to get judgment in lower courts. The lower courts in Nigeria have been working very hard to dispense justice in a number of matters, especially civil matters, criminal matters. They have been up and doing in dispensing justice. And in such matters, they are proved to be the last hope of the common man. But where the challenge is in political matters.
Mm.
In political matters, the lower courts have always fallen short of expectation, probably because of some undue influence by politicians or some gratification from politicians. No one knows exactly. What we know is that in political matters, the lower court have failed Nigerians and have failed to live up to expectation. In the case under reference, you will see that there was a very clear evidence of judicial rascality, because when this suit was commenced, it was very strange that parties that have produced candidates for various national elections in 2027 should be deregistered. Parties that have existed for years and that have even sponsored candidates in previous elections, that have even held some elective positions in previous elections should be deregistered. Nigerians saw it as an attack on democracy. Nigerians saw it as a vicious attack on their right to choose who leads them in this country. And so it was a very an affront to the democracy that we claim to practice. And that was why there was so much outcry. But more instructive is that the people that brought this suit had no competence to bring the suit. Because what determines court jurisdiction? First of all, the person bringing a case to court must have competence. He must have a legal personality. Legal personality, we say it's a juristic, it should be a juristic person. It should be a person known to law. If you're not a natural person and you're an artificial person, it must be an incorporated entity known to law. If you are not a registered association or a person known to law, then the court lacks competence to hear such a matter. Now, the subject matter again has to be within the jurisdiction of the court. If the subject matter is outside the jurisdiction of the court, then the court is said to lack jurisdiction to entertain such a matter. In this instant case, the case was brought by an innocuous association that calls themselves Forum of Former Legislators. What is Forum of Former Legislators? That we should bring this kind of case that will disturb the ecosystem of our politics that have gone, we have got to a very red line where political parties are gearing up for 2027 election. Then suddenly an innocuous party comes up and says they are forum of former legislators. They are not registered. They are not incorporated. The law doesn't know them. If you run an association and you are not registered with the Corporate Affairs Commission in Abuja, it means the law does not know you. And you lack competence to bring any action before the court. Now, this was brought to the attention of the judge, Peter Lifu, and yet he went ahead to hear the matter. And again, when the defendants, parties like ADC and the rest of them, Accord Party, when they saw the body movement of the judge, the signs, they went on appeal to stop the judge from hearing the matter, because to them, this innocuous organization that call themselves Forum of Formal Legislation are unknown to law, and that they don't have any competence to bring an action to court. And at the Court of Appeal, the court gave an interim order staying execution or staying proceedings of the Federal High Court matter. And it is reported that the judge ignored that order from the Court of Appeal to stay proceedings and went ahead to hear the matter and gave decision, directing INEC to deregister these political parties. Now, the issue of political association is a fundamental right of citizens because it touches on the right of citizens to associate freely with people they consider of like minds. Chapter 4 of the 1999 Constitution guarantees for every Nigerian the right to freedom of association, the right to freedom of assembly, peaceful assembly. And formation of political parties is an expression of this right by citizens, the right to peaceful assembly. When political parties meet, it is an exercise of that right to peaceful assembly. When people form political parties, when people meet on political platforms, it is an exercise of that right to association. So when you now deregister such political parties, it means you are infringing on citizens' right to freedom of association and the right to peaceful assembly. And such infringement cannot be taken rightly by any court of law or court of equity. You remember that Ganifa Wahimi was the person that set the pace when he registered National Conscience Party and failed to win a single elective position. No, not even local government chairman or councillor. And the INEC registered his National Conscience Party. Now, Ganifa Wahimi went to court to object to that registration. Peaceful assembly have the right to freedom of association. And the purported registration by INEC was an infringement of this right. The Supreme Court was able to approve, acknowledge, and in fact, accept the argument of Ganifa Wahimi that the registration of National Conscience Party was wrongful, was illegal, and was an infringement of the fundamental rights of members of National Conscience Party. And therefore, the INEC was ordered to return National Conscience Party as a political party in Nigeria. That was a precedent that every court should follow in Nigeria. Political parties, if there's the constitutional provision that says a political party that does not win elective positions, does not win local government chairman in any of the states, does not have, should be deregistered. Such constitutional provision infringes Chapter 4 of the Constitution that makes it a fundamental right of citizens to have peaceful assembly and freedom of association.
You know, just like you rightly mentioned, that it was the case between the case that you mentioned.
Yes. Ganifa Wahimi, yes.
All right. You know, when you talk about judicial precedents, a lot of people would say that this is not what we are used to. This is not what the courts follow, you know, in recent times.
Yes.
Because I could remember that there has been this argument about first of all, it was the status antebellum that we saw
Yes.
when the Court of Appeal gave that judgment. And we saw that a lot of people lent their voices, a lot of people gave their interpretations. Many lawyers, gave the best, what they thought was the best, interpretation. And now we saw this one from the Federal High Court, where they sat on a case when, even despite the order from the Court of Appeal saying that they should stay proceedings. So when you look at all this, when you look at, not just because of the case between ADC and the legislators, group of legislators, we are looking beyond that. What do you think could have, triggered all that? What do you think triggers that? Do you think it's, lack of discipline on the part of justices? Is it that they lack, the ability to properly interpret the 1999 Constitution?
Okay, your question takes me to the what I would call judges selection process. Who selects these judges? How are they selected? What are the qualifications of these judges? Some judges are very bright, very articulate. If you are a lawyer, you appear before them. If you do not prepare very well, they will mess you up. They will expose your ignorance. But some judges are really dull mentally. Some judges don't have the mental energy to be a judge in any case. For such judges, how were they recruited? To be a judge, one should be of sound mind, one should be sound in law, to know the law and to know where to find the law. Because the job of a judge is not just an adult task. When a matter is before the judge takes argument from lawyers from both sides. And these arguments help the judge to situate his own opinion, relying on what we call stare decisis. That is, relying on cases already decided. There are similar cases already decided in the past by superior courts. Then the judge is under duty to abide by such decisions by superior courts. If the judge must depart from such decisions, he must give reason why he has to depart from the previous decision of the superior court, either by distinguishing that the facts of the earlier case is not the same with the present case. So what we see is that in political cases, the politicians try to corrupt the judiciary in the sense that when the judges receive gifts from politicians, when judges receive gifts from governors, receive gifts from ministers, every such gift corrupts the mind. So that you see that a judge that is supposed to be a bright and sound judge will begin to dance to the tune of the executives. Look at the story in Abuja where the Minister of Civil Capital Territory is building mansions for judges of the Supreme Court. So how do you expect judges to decide a case in which the Federal Minister of FCT has interest? So such gifts corrupts the mind of our judges.
I've also noticed that some cases, especially political cases, there are judges that handle such cases.
Yes.
Judges like Justice Peter Lifu, we've seen him handle a lot of political cases. I think he has another one, the one that has to do with Nafio Gumbe and also the ADC. I don't know how he's being assigned.
What happens is that politicians know which judge to go to. And it's very easy. Now, how are judges recruited? They are recruited by the governors. If the Supreme Court now says that, okay, we need to fill spaces, there are spaces like 5 vacancies in Enugu State Judiciary. How are they selected? They don't go to MBA to select the best of lawyers to fill these positions. The Enugu State government will meet with the chief judge of Enugu State. And the governor will take 3 of the slots, of the 5 slots, leaving the CJ with 2. and then the CJ takes anybody that catches his fancy. It could be his relative, it could be his son, it could be just anybody. And the governor at the same time takes people from his area. And nobody talks about qualification and competence at this stage. Then, if they do not meet up with the number of cases they are supposed to meet up with, they pad these things, and then go to National Judicial Commission to influence the process.
In other words, the recruitment process is already
It's
faulty.
40 from day one, because the only people that determine who becomes a judge at state level is the governor and the chief judge. And when the governor and the chief judge are the people that decide who becomes a judge, there's no competition. Then when these judges become sitting judges, the governor will always seek favors, and they will always dance towards these favors, because if not for the governor, there wouldn't be a judge. You see why I said that gifts corrupt the mind. So if there's a neutral process where judges are selected by a process maybe through MBA, where the National Bar Association, Nigerian Bar Association, and the bar associations of every state will now choose from among themselves competent lawyers, experienced lawyers they believe should be judges in the state. And then these lawyers are sent to National Judicial Commission. Then you see that we'll be able to choose good judges, competent judges, who will resist the temptation that comes with the money that politicians are throwing about. But when you allow governors and the chief judge of a state to be the sole people that determine who becomes judges, then the selection process is already faulty. And that is what we get by judges who do not play by the rules. They do not play by the rules, but when it comes to politics, they want to know what their, what I would call their principal or their mentor, because they consider such people as mentors. Those who made them judges are considered as mentors, as their ogas. What would the oga say about this? And when the oga slips in an opinion or a note to him about cases that are pending before him, he doesn't look at the merit of the case anymore. All he wants to do is to pander towards the sentiment of his oga on top, so as to please him. This is the corruption of our judicial process, which we have to start now to correct. And that is, you see, when judges depend on the state governors to buy them houses, when judges depend on state governors to buy them vehicles, to rehabilitate courts, then such judges will be very wary to give judgment against the government, because they do not want to be out of favor. We have seen cases where governors sponsor judges to annual vacations, to go abroad on vacations. Like we are all going on vacation this July. Every court is going on vacation late July, August, and part of September. They will sponsor judges to these vacations, and those they consider that are not pro-government or are giving judgment against government, they drop those ones and they will not sponsor them to vacations.
All right.
How do we explain that?
Let's look at what Justice Peter Lifu relied on, because he cited in that judgment, the previous one that he made, he cited Section 225 of the Nigerian Constitution, and this gives the INEC the legal power to remove a political party's registration, and that is if the political party failed to secure at least 25% of votes in a single state. Now, looking at that judgment and what he relied on, do you think he was under pressure to make that judgment? I mean, because you rightly stated that you gave another interpretation, that was not what he interpreted, was not the real interpretation of the 1999 what that section of the law, and the fact that people who did not have the local standing to even challenge such a suit, do you think he was under pressure to give that judgment?
Well, I think that he was influenced to give that judgment. It's a feeling. I do not have evidence to back this up, but it's just a conjecture that in most cases, when judges derail from the basic principles of law, it could be an influence by the political gladiators, especially in political cases. Now, the constitution talking about 25% in a particular state is not dependent on 2023 election alone.
For any other election.
Any other election, because what the Court of Appeal is complaining that the judge did not pay attention to evidence before it. Other parties like Accord Party brought evidence that they have had people who won senatorial election, senatorial seat in this Nigeria, Accord Party. There are other people who won, who went to Court of Appeal, House of Representatives on Accord Party, and other states where they have people in the House of Assembly. But the judge fixated himself on just the result of the 2023 election. If a Accord Party has won 25% in previous elections, but failed to win in 2023 election, is it enough to register it? What stops them from winning more than 25% even in the next election? So I think the judge boxed himself into a corner, probably because there was undue influence, or because there was something like an expectation from those who wanted him to decide one way or another. But the most important thing is that no judge in Nigeria should disobey the order of a superior court. The Court of Appeal had given an order of stay of proceedings. He shouldn't have proceeded with that case to the extent of giving judgment, when the Court of Appeal has already decided that you should stay action while we listen to complaints that have been brought to us concerning the case pending before you. Every reasonable judge should have stayed action if you do not have a personal interest in the matter. You should stay action until the outcome of the appeal before you proceed with the case. But Justice Lifu proceeded with the case despite the Court of Appeal interim order for him to stay proceedings. And that's why we talk about judicial rascality. You don't operate as if you are an institution by yourself. Every inferior court, because we consider all high courts are courts of record, but they are under the Court of Appeal, while the Court of Appeal is under the Supreme Court. Now, if a matter is before the Court of Appeal and the Supreme Court gives an interim order for the Court of Appeal to stay proceedings, the Court of Appeal has to completely stay proceedings until the Supreme Court decides on the interim application has come before them. That is how the judiciary is wired, to avoid confusion. And to ensure that the judiciary remains the last hope of a common man. But when you find a situation where judges allow themselves to be influenced by the executive, then it becomes a state of confusion. Like what happened in the past in Ebonyi State in 2021-22, when Dave Umahi was removed as governor by Justice Eko in Federal High Court Abuja, because he decamped from PDP that elected him into office as governor to APC in November 2020. The PDP went to court, and Justice Eko of Federal High Court Abuja made an order, in fact a judgment, that Dave Umahi was no more the governor of Ebonyi State. But what happened? Dave Umahi sponsored lawyers to go to a court in Abakaliki, Ebonyi State High Court, for the court to order stay of execution of the Federal High Court judgment. These are courts of coordinate jurisdiction. If you are not happy with the judgment of the Federal High Court, you go on appeal to the Court of Appeal and seek stay of proceeding, stay of execution of the judgment. But rather you went to a court of coordinate jurisdiction, a state high court, asking the court to give order to stop the execution of the Federal High Court judgment. That is an abuse of court process. And that is what we are saying. Why should a governor do that? And why should a lawyer who is aware of the Federal High Court judgment go to a coordinate judicial court of, that is the state high court, to obtain an order staying execution of the Federal High Court judgment? It is an aberration, and it is an abuse of court process. So the National Judicial Commission should live up to their billing.
All right, I was coming to that because from the judgment that was given by the Court of Appeal, you know, there are some things that lawyers call comments.
Yes.
Well, they describe the action as a form of judicial impertinence, and they also cited the fact that the Supreme Court had previously held that a judge who acts in such a manner is unfit, quote, for the bench, as the conduct amounts to judicial rascality.
Yes.
Now you mentioned the NJC, because for this is not just the first time. We have seen other cases like this where the lower courts will, leave the judgment made by a higher court, and also even sit on that particular case. So, in this regard, do you think that there should be consequences for for doing such a thing? Do you think that NJC at this point should, take up this case and make sure that the consequence of this action is being taken up?
Yes, the Court of Appeal made that terrible statements against the judge, Peter Lifu. But it ends there.
Why should it end there?
Unless the National Judicial Commission takes it up.
Okay.
Why are some errant judges still operating as judges? It is because the National Judicial Commission has decided to look the other way. But to be fair to the commission has in the past disciplined some errant judges. Some errant judges lately, some were stopped from proceeding on to the Court of Appeal, on promotion to the Court of Appeal. Some were retired compulsorily. Some were just disciplined one way or the other because of certain things considered as gross misconduct. But lately, the National Judicial Commission is no longer living up to its billing because of political interest. A situation where you have judges pandering to the executive. The Chief Justice of Nigeria is the chairman of National Judicial Commission. And the Chief Justice of Nigeria, our Justice of the Supreme Court, received car gifts from the President, received mansions from the President, depends on the President to bankroll their foreign trips when they go on vacation. How can such justices of the Supreme Court handle cases involving government and individuals or citizens? You see that such gifts corrupt the mind, and they will not be able to have the political will and the mental energy, and in fact, to be able to decide such cases without fear or favor, because their remuneration, their financial success in office depends on the executive. And that is why when such cases happen, remember this case before Peter Lifu, brought by a forum of former legislators. The Attorney General of the Federation was part of that forum of former. In fact, they supported the case.
He was
Yes.
he was mentioned as one of the defendants
Exactly.
in the case,
And he argued in favor
exactly.
of
So when you
the
have
forum.
someone of such repute
Yes.
speaking for,
So when we are now talking about influence, you can see that the presence of the Attorney General of the Federation supporting this case must have unduly influenced Peter Lifu to take the steps he took. Because Attorney General of the Federation is the legal officer of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, federal government. He's the #1 legal officer of the federal government. So when you see Attorney General of Nigeria in a matter, you have seen the President of Nigeria in such a matter. And that is where the influence must have come for Peter Lifu to ignore the interim order of the Court of Appeal and went ahead to mess himself up like the way he has done. And so why would the Attorney General of the Federation support this type of case to deregister existing political parties? Because they want to narrow the space of the opposition and then make it easier for President Tinubu to win a second term. That is just the simple explanation. And that is why the Nigerians are complaining that President Tinubu should concentrate on delivering the political promises he made to Nigerians and forget opposition to thrive. Opposition parties have the right to thrive without undue harassment, without undue litigation that is being instigated by the office of the Attorney General of the Federation, they have the right to run their affairs so that in the next election of 2027, Nigerian people will decide who leads them. Tinubu thinks he has done very well. He presents himself to Nigerians. Let the Nigerians decide whether to give him second term or whether to have a breather by choosing another candidate. But for you to now, the registered political parties are in opposition so as to narrow the opposition space, that is anti-democratic. And that is the bane of our democracy. And that is why Nigerians are crying out that Tinubu is narrowing the political space through this undue harassment and intimidation of opposition figures, opposition parties.
Right.
So that is exactly where the fourth line is. The presence of Attorney General of the Federation in such a matter, supporting the argument that existing political parties should be deregistered, you can see the hand of the president in it. And that is why Peter Lifu allowed himself to be unduly influenced.
You know, this judgment is coming at a time that Nigerians will say that they have lost confidence in the judiciary.
Exactly.
A lot of people will say they are beginning to, but some people, majority of Nigerians will say they have lost confidence in the judiciary, right?
On political matters especially.
On political matters, exactly. Yes. And you rightly mentioned that we have the Attorney General of the Federation, Lateef Fagbemi, who is supposed to, he should have, you know, the law on the tip of his fingers, right?
Yes.
But he is now supporting such judgment, such ruling from the Federal High Court, despite the fact that those people do not have the locus to challenge, to even come up with that suit. So, what do you think with this Court of Appeal judgment? What do you think? How significant do you think it is, you know, to help boost the confidence, the trust that Nigerians have in judiciary?
The Court of Appeal judgment is an epoch-making judgment because it has laid back the fears and apprehension of Nigerians towards 2027. Nigerians feel that the judiciary is in bed with the executive to give President Tinubu second term. By this decision by Court of Appeal, that notion has been destroyed. That the court is still there to do justice to all manner of people. And that now the court still remains the last hope of the common man. Because if not for this judgment of the Court of Appeal, all the efforts that these opposition political parties, ADC, and the rest of them have done could have come to nothing. And then we will have a narrower space to operate. But with this judgment, these political parties can go ahead and run their affairs, present their candidates, and then run for the election. It is pivotal because it will save our democracy. It will reassure Nigerians that all is not lost, that there is still hope that this country can be saved. It can be saved because the court, that is the final arbiter, still has some courage to make a decision. But let it not be that the Court of Appeal is making this decision just because the interim order was flouted by Judge Peter Lifu. Let it not be that they are angry because the interim order was not obeyed. Let it be that they see on merit that Peter Lifu had no jurisdiction to hear this matter, and that these political parties have powers and to operate, even given the constitutional computation. You don't restrict, when you are interpreting the Constitution, you don't give it a restrictive interpretation to narrow down the rights of citizens. You give it a broad interpretation to accommodate the fundamental right of citizens. I have said before that the fundamental right of citizens, the right to freedom of assembly, peaceful assembly, right to freedom of association is paramount. And no legislature, not even National Assembly, can legislate out of it. National Assembly cannot make any law abridging the rights of people to associate freely with people of like minds. So the Constitution cannot be interpreted to abridge that right to freedom of association. That is where Peter Lifu got it wrong. He should have interpreted that section 251 of the Constitution liberally to ensure that the citizens' right to freedom of association and the right to assemble freely and peacefully is not infringed. But he gave it narrow interpretation, thereby bringing an absurd situation where we find that most political parties in the opposition are now registered, were registered, and then members disenfranchised from exercising their franchise in
You know,
2027.
I love the fact that you mentioned, let it not be that let it be that the Court of Appeal gave the judgment because they saw fault in what Justice Lifu
On merit.
delivered,
On the merit of it.
not because the order was not obeyed.
Not because they were
Because
not obeyed.
why I'm saying this is because the status quo ante bellum was also given by the Court of Appeal.
Yes.
That judgment was given by the Court of Appeal, and it went all the way to the Supreme Court, and it was later struck out. So we have seen different judgments, different interpretation, different judgment, and that is why Nigerians will say that they do not have confidence in the court. So when you when you look at all this, right? What would you say? Because I know that the ADC, they also have one hurdle to cross. They have the case of Nafi Gumbi, which will be presided by the same Peter Lifu, Justice Peter Lifu. Do you think that the statement from the Court of Appeal would influence the next judgment?
Well, I think that it will influence the next judgment because no judge likes to be reprimanded by a superior court. It's a minus for any judge to be reprimanded. Such negative comments from Court of Appeal will certainly operate against him when it comes to elevating him to Court of Appeal. There are so many judges who were entitled to be elevated to Court of Appeal. Then the National Judicial Commission will look at your records. Even if they didn't take any action against Justice Lifu now, because of the negative comments, when the time comes for Justice Lifu to be elevated to Court of Appeal, this record will count. What is his antecedents as a judge of a high court? How many of his judgments have been overruled by the court? And this one will surface that yes, in this particular case, he disobeyed the Court of Appeal interim order and went ahead to hear a matter brought by a party that has no juristic personality before the law. And then, even when there was interim order from the Court of Appeal, he went ahead to decide the case against the interim order of the Court of Appeal. They say this is judicial rascality. Such a judge cannot be elevated to the Court of Appeal. Right. So he will pay dearly for it. So I know that the result of this case will influence his future conduct. So that if he's being influenced by an Attorney General of the Federation, an Attorney General comes again, he will say, come, Attorney General, you see what the Court of Appeal said in the other case. Please, I don't want to do this again. So I think it will be a deterrent, not only to him, but for other judges.
All right, we'll have to get to the top lines. We've been speaking with Chief Barrister Ogbonnaya Amos Okoro. He is a constitutional lawyer and a public affairs analyst. Well, you can call those numbers to make your comments and contributions on this recent judgment by the Court of Appeal. They have ordered that 5 political parties, including ADC, should be recognized by the Independent National Electoral Commission. 0916 000 4945. Hello. Good evening to you. Good evening. All right, go on. Mm. All right. All right. All right. All right. All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Karimo. Keep the calls coming. Hello. Good evening to you. All right. Go on. Go on.
It's a very nice man. I know I followed him in other your first radio. You know, you said it all. You let me tell you the truth, the else. This week I live, Nigeria is holding that man. That man never give judgment that people will not complain. And I don't know the reason why Nigeria bar are allowing him to be the High Court judge. I was thinking by now, the man is supposed to be suspended. I don't understand. Because the position whole judge this man has given, it's not the direction of my part. And I said congratulations to Court of Appeal, who restored the hope of common men, in this matter. And I believe the Supreme Court will still do so. Because you're aware of what is happening here. The reason why I know is getting away from the people they are doing is because the judiciary is backing them up. Because I've been that when INEC announced that they are not going to restore the judiciary correctly, this is will stop. Because of when they do it, they'll ask me to go to court. When you go to court, the judiciary will do their own. Their own will review what's on the INEC. So that is the reason why they do it like this. But I pray that these two Supreme Court and the Court of Appeal judges will be different from what has been seen in this country. That's our hope, because we're seeing that all these judges, the High Court, they are all compromised. Look at the list, look at the other one. Including a lot of shop, all of them are compromised lawyers. And God should allow them to get to Court of Appeal to get to the Supreme Court. Let's remember that.
All right. Thank you very much. Thank you for your thoughts. Keep the calls coming. Hello. Hello. Good evening to you. All right. Go on. All right. All right. All right. All right. Thank you. Thank you very much. Keep the calls coming. 0916 000 4945. Let's get your thoughts. Hello. Good evening to you. All right. Go on. Ah.
And as an expert in law, you will have made questions or identified those people before going ahead to execute the judgment. So I don't think, well, I don't think, in whichever way it appears, thank God that the appellate court had said that the five political parties have all the case
All right.
to contest the election completely.
All right. All right.
My position, thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. Let's take one more call before we get back to our guest. Hello. Hello. Good evening to you. Good evening to you. Uh, all right. Go on.
You see, your guy is a very nice person. That is what we are talking about, justice. You see all these things, and people are wondering, how is it that this particular community started a long time, and now they're going to the them? Because I wonder, every small thing they go to court, every small thing they go to court, don't think that somebody can easily, set, and it is like this matter. So, but my worry now is, I think they are going to that to the Supreme Court. So I don't know what they are going to do. So your guest can even, because I know maybe the same people will still go to Supreme Court. And because you don't know what is happening until when they go to Supreme Court. So but I hope, I'm sure that the judiciary now is waking up. Because another judge will say such that the justice that the that is not what is supposed to be. So that is so that let us start begin to look to them as a court of injustice. Now we are seeing that they are court of justice. So that's what I want to say, baby.
All right. Thank you very much. We have to get back to our guest in the studio. Um, Barrister Obunaya Amos Okoro. All right. Because I wanted to ask you. I know that the ADC has already petitioned the NJC in that regard. To sanction Justice Peter Lifu. Do you think there is a headway in that? Do you think something reasonable will come out of it?
I've already said that the Chief Justice of Nigeria is the chairman of NJC, National Judicial Commission.
Mm.
So if the ADC has petitioned the same NJC, and this case is coming from the federal government of Nigeria, what would the NJC do to Peter Lifu? Nothing. Because they are looking at President Enugu. Where the whole National Assembly is standing on a mandate of a president. National Assembly, that is legislature, are supposed to be checking the president, the executive, and balancing the executive against oppression and against the citizens of Nigeria. National Assembly are supposed to protect Nigerians against the executive. They are standing on the mandate of somebody they should check and balance. So I am not surprised. I will not be surprised if nothing comes out of the petition. Like I said, allowing federal government of Nigeria to build mansions for justices of the Supreme Court is a red line. You see, that is the problem we have in our judiciary. How can the judiciary receive gifts from federal government? And then the same federal government, through the Attorney General, goes to a federal high court judge to give a judgment delisting political parties so that only Tinubu will contest in 2027. And then you petition such a judge who has carried out instruction from the Attorney General of the Federation. How would the NJC sack such a judge? That is the problem we have. I am saying that this country is standing on a very wrong structure. That wrong structure is that there is no physical federalism. The judiciary should have its own budget and be allowed to have their own money and use their own money. If they want to build houses for themselves, let them build houses for themselves. If they want to buy cars for themselves, let them buy cars for themselves. Don't depend on the minister for FCT to buy cars for them or to build houses for them and then hand over these houses to them. Don't depend on the president to send them on vacation, give them car gifts, give them cash gifts. These gifts corrupt the mind.
No, a lot of people would say they can collect the gift and still.
No,
make
no,
the
no,
right
no. They cannot
decisions.
correct the gift and do what is right. They cannot correct the gift. Not everybody is disciplined when it comes to gifts. Even in a police station, even in the court. When you are a lawyer, you practice in our courts. We have a way with the court registrars. If you want your file to get attention in good time, you give tips. You see that it is the lawyer that gives tips to registrars and court clerks that are often attended to. They receive you warmly.
All right.
And any matter coming from you, even if you're not there, they give it accelerated attention.
All right.
So what I am saying is that not only the judiciary, including the legislature of the states. Have you ever heard any state impeaching a governor?
All right.
It is because the governor buys houses for them, governor buys cars for them, governor uses their money and tells them how to use their money.
All right.
Everybody should have 3 organs of government: legislature, judiciary, executive. Every of the organs should have his own money. And work his own budget, not depending on the executive and standing on the mandate of the executive so that the executive will give them their money.
All right,
Thank you
very much.
That is the structural problem we have in this country. Until we get to it and change it, we will continue to have this problem.
All right, thank you very much, Chief Barrister Ogbonnaya Amos Okoro, a constitutional lawyer and public affairs analyst. Thank you so much for that insight. Well, I said earlier that the ADC has one more hurdle to cross. They still have a case between ADC and Nafiu Gombe. So we are still keeping tabs on that. I think it was supposed to, I don't know whether it's today or tomorrow, but we'll keep tabs on that and see what will happen, how it pans out. My name is Ifoma Mapufo, and Newsbreak will be up next.